good evening, everybody. Peace and blessings, and welcome to the first Conversations with Asiya here with Women of Ascension and in 2026. I am your host, Asiya Nasir, and founder of Women of Ascension, certified life coach and author. So I am super excited about tonight's show, being that it's our first, introducing Women of Ascension. And Women of Ascension is just what it sounds like. It's for women that are looking to take themselves from where they are and ascending to where they're striving to be and doing the hard work, doing the personal development in order to get you there with prayers and support. So our show is a conduit to being able to have those difficult conversations, but at the same time, in a safe space, non-judgmental space, and it's a space where sisterhood and we can come together to support one another. So with tonight's show, our intention with this show. So I want to start off with this is always about our intention and being sincere. So tonight's conversation is a little sensitive. And with that being said, we want to have the attention, all of us here, the speakers, myself as the host. Our intention is to create a space of compassion, the support that I was speaking of, and letting you know that you're not alone in this journey. So, with that being said, let's get right into our conversation when the cradle is empty, infertility, loss, and hope. So before we get into the conversation, I would like to introduce our guests that are with us today. They have been with me on other platforms that we have through our, my other companies, Jessica Cares. They've been on our talk show there, but this is their first here with Women of Ascension. So I would like to introduce, starting off with Sharia Schultz. She is a very special friend of mine. I've known her for a few years. I've seen her journey and so proud of her. So I would like for her to introduce herself to you, and she'll be sharing her personal story with the topic that we're talking about today. So welcome, Sharia.
Welcome. Assalamu alaikum and good evening to everyone. Thank you so much. It's such an honor and pleasure to be joined with you today on a topic that, you know, at one time I just wish never existed. So I'll just jump right into it. As you know, as you've said, my name is Sharia Shields. I am the CEO and founder of a nonprofit organization, Buddy Speaks, which provides education and awareness to help prevent in childhood sexual assault and support survivors of sexual assault. I wear several hats. I'm an author. I wrote a book, a children's book called My Voice is My Superpower, which helps parents to navigate through uncomfortable conversations with their children, to teach them, to empower them to know that their voice can be used if someone makes them feel unsafe or uncomfortable, and that they are the boss of their bodies. In addition, I'm an educator. I'm a school teacher with over 17 years teaching experience. I'm making my way down to another path. I have a master's of science in education. I have early childhood education certification, and I am now working on my second master's degree in school counseling. So I am about to start inshallah, God willing, I'll be starting my clinicals in the fall. And God willing, I will be coming from out of the classroom, but going into the classroom in another realm, which is my passion, my first love as a school counselor. And I'll be able to support my students a different way. I have received numerous awards, KYW News Radio Game Changer, awards from the masjid for the work that I've done speaking out to support survivors. I too am a survivor of childhood sexual assault, and I've worked with women organized against rape, survivors of abuse and recovery in Delaware, and many multiple organizations to help to protect our babies, to help to support adults like me, to help to educate parents. And I'm just so happy and grateful to be here. I know I missed some things because I've done quite a few, but I don't want to take up all the time talking about me because we have so much talking about me and my accomplishments because we have so much more to talk about. But here's a quick clip of who I am, Sharia.
Well, wonderful. So for those of you that are tuning in, as you can see, now you see why I asked her to be on the show. And with our next guest here, this is a sister that I admire so much. I've seen her work through other platforms, heard her speak, giving her level of expertise. on topics that have also been very sensitive, some tough conversations, and really bringing that hope. And that's what she's going to really be, lending along with Sister Maria, lending, that perspective of it. Because sometimes when we have difficult conversations, we just kind of stick right there where it's the issue, but not the hope and the solutions. And that's what our next guest is going to be sharing, and that is Nazia Hassan. So, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Sister Asiya. It's such an honor to be here. Please excuse my voice. I'm recovering from a cold, but alhamdulillah, I'm here. And like Sister Sharia said, Sister Asiya said, this is a very sensitive topic. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I'm licensed in New York and New Jersey. I have over 10 years of experience treating children, adolescents, and adults with various mental health related disorders, personal issues, challenges, stressors, and life stressors and whatnot. I also specialize in substance abuse. I've worked with adolescents who experience substance abuse, who have been diagnosed with substance abuse disorders, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, and so much more. And I'm an educator. I work at Queensborough Community College, where I teach, and I also see students for personal counseling. I'm a big advocate for mental health, as well as wellness, and just being holistically well and thriving. So that's my background. Alhamdulillah, I've spoken at a lot of different platforms. I've given speeches, presentations on mental health, and alhamdulillah, I'm just glad to be here and glad to be talking about this very pertinent topic, which, hopefully lends into healing and, growth, and gives us a space to really voice our concerns, inshallah.
Right. Well, welcome to the show. She's also been a guest on our various other shows as well, and have always lent so much hope and so much enlightenment. That's really the word that I can think of, is enlightenment. So let's get right into this conversation, because we have a lot to unpack in this conversation. It is layered. So we want to make sure that we're being gentle in this conversation, touching all different bases. And if those that are tuning in, if you have a question or you want to share, please put it in the chat so that way we can go ahead. So we're tuning in from YouTube, not Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and here on StreamYard. So, please, join us and engage in the conversation. So I want to start with Sharia. I asked Sharia, I reached out to the community when I mentioned that this was the topic that we wanted to talk about for our first conversations with Asiya, with Women of Ascension. And Sharia stepped right in and said, I want to talk about it because she has a personal journey as it relates to infertility. So the first question I want to ask you, Sharia, is can you take us back to the moment you realized the journey of, having children might not be as you had hoped or as you had thought?
Okay. I'm going to go back to when I was in my early 20s, going to the doctor's office and because I had issues with scar tissue, which is connected to me being a survivor of sexual assault and teenage date rape. So some things took place when I was violated, and it caused me to have lots of scar tissue. So nonetheless, I went to the doctors, and I had, we call it a dye test. It's when they shoot dye inside of your body, inside of your uterus, and they to see if your ovaries work, and I mean, see if you're, the not the ovaries, but to see if the dye is going to come through your fallopian tube. And I remember after I had the procedure and came back to talk to the doctor, she said to me, you have a 20% chance of ever getting pregnant. Your right tube is damaged, and your left tube, the dye, when the dye would go through your tube, it would swell up like a sausage. And our tubes are thin like hair, like string. It would swell up like sausage, and only 20% of the dye went through. So, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you'll never be able to have children. So could you imagine being told this and remembering the sexual assault is what caused me to have the scar tissue, which caused me to go to the, for these results. So I cried. I've always wanted to be a mother, since I was a kid. I'm a Schultz. Schultz women have babies. My grandmother had 13 children, and you're a woman, I'm educated, and, it's just like, that's what you're supposed to do. You get married, you have children. And, I wasn't always Muslim. I was raised a Lutheran. So, even as a Lutheran growing up, even as a non-Muslim, I always wanted to get married and have children. And my life kind of like stopped in front of me. Like, I can't have kids. I was devastated.
Absolutely.
Like, wow. Yeah.
And it's such a young age.
At such a young age, she told me that I would never be able to have children. And I lived with that pain and that grief. And for many, many years. But I didn't give up hope, but I did give up hope, if that makes any sense. It was heavy. Because like the door was closed. You're never going to be a mom.
Right.
For women, we define ourselves with, a lot of us define ourselves with motherhood. Like you're a whole woman if you can have children. And then be told you'll never be able to have children.
Right.
That was very heavy.
I can imagine just listening to you. I'm just kind of thinking, I had my first child at 21, and the thought of, a doctor telling me I can't have children, I don't know how I would have responded. So with that, with what you just said, I want to ask you, being young, understanding the cause of why this is happening to you was from something that was beyond your control, and it was something that was, traumatic in and of itself. What parts of yourself felt most challenged in this season?
My womanhood, my femininity, I can even add my, because we have to be vulnerable if we're going to share our stories. My faith in God, like, why would God do this to me? Why me? Because you do ask those questions. It doesn't mean that you don't believe in God, but your faith gets weak and you question, like, why would he choose for me to not have any children? By this time I was actually Muslim. So, it was hard. It was hard. And, I feeling less than a woman. Like I can never, and feeling afraid, honestly, who's going to want to marry me? I can't have kids.
That's a big one.
Who would want, or I'll always have to be, because Islam allows a man to have more than one wife, I will always have to be in polygyny because, like, I'm no good.
You may want to have children, right?
I can't have children, and whoever I marry, they're going to either be old or they're going to want another wife because they're going to want children. So it was, it was rough.
Yeah, I can, well, if it makes sense, it's like, I can imagine, but I can't imagine, obviously, not, being in that situation. So I want to, because you just brought on some heavy stuff as far as the emotional part of it, the spiritual aspect of it, the psychological aspect of it, thinking of what your future looks like and it's not being what you initially, dreamed it to be. I want to go to Sister Nazia, and I want to ask you, from a clinical and an emotional standpoint, right? Why is infertility, and this is different from having a miscarriage or a stillborn birth, right? This is a little bit different. So from a clinical and a emotional perspective, why is infertility often experienced as a form of grief? Like what Sharia was just explaining, she was going through a grieving process, even though technically there was no physical loss yet. It wasn't like she had a baby and there was a loss, but she was grieving a child that they told her would never be. Can you speak to that?
So a couple of things come to my mind, right, when it comes to infertility and loss. When we think about grief and we think about loss, we think about losing something, right? And Like we think about, losing something, losing someone or something, losing a pet, losing a loved one. But there's also anticipatory loss, which means loss that's, that is predated, right? It hasn't occurred yet. We know that's not there, but if I'm trying to make sense, right? We
No,
know
you are. Mm-hmm.
if we know that it's not going to be there. We hoped for this, but it's not going to be there. So there's anticipatory loss, right? Um, an example that I can think of is when we hear when someone, back in during Islamic history, right, when the Sahaba went into battle, right, a lot of women stayed back. There was one particular woman who stayed back, and she didn't hear from her husband or a sibling. I forget what it is. That's anticipatory loss. That's saying that is what it means, is that 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 person's not going to come back, or that that's not going to happen. Something not occurring is a form of loss and grief,
Right.
right? So grief isn't just about actually losing something. It's actually something not being there, something not existing. And so that's why, infertility and loss go hand in hand, and grief go hand in hand. And grief has 5 stages. We know the 5 stages, right? We know that it's what is it? Denial, um, anger, bargaining, um, depression, and then acceptance. If I'm
Right.
not mistaken, the Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. And so people go through those stages, right? People are, when someone hears that news, I can only imagine when someone hears that news of, you're not going to be able to become a mother, or, you're not going to be able to have children, right? People at first, they're like,
Well,
that's
denial is like a shock.
denial, right? It's a
Mhm.
shock. It comes as a shock. So it's the same thing. People are undergoing those 5 stages of grief when it comes to infertility. And so that's why they go hand in hand.
Wow. So you're speaking to Sharia. You were saying that it was like at first you were like you asked the question. You said I felt this way, but I didn't feel this way. So it was kind of like that. I gave up hope, but I had hope. So it was almost like that denial. Someone is telling you no, but you haven't had that acceptance, right? And it was
Right.
layered. Your feelings from what you were expressing was very layered. You even the bargaining, why me? And this, what had happened to me, and the anger and feeling like, why is this happening to me? You just expressed all of that even before, Sister Nazia mentioned it. Did it feel layered to you, like you went through those 5 stages, of grief, even though there wasn't technically a physical loss?
Yeah, and actually, you know, I actually got married afterwards, and I was married to someone who had several children,
Mhm.
and we were married for maybe 3 years, and I didn't use any birth control or anything, and I wouldn't get pregnant, and I was just like, I don't believe what she said. I was just like, look, I'm gonna try. He had kids with other people. Maybe he could get me pregnant. I don't know.
Right.
And then I just got to the point where I was like, you know what? I said, I just give up. I'm never gonna get pregnant. I'm just going to save my money and work on my Beyonce body. And I really, I swear, I never forget. I started going to the gym. I had money saved up. I was like, I'm going to work on my Beyonce body, and I'm going to just do me, because I just, this was, by this time I was 33.
Mm.
And I was just like, I'm just not going to be a mom. And I'm just going to just look nice. But I loved on everyone's kids.
Your
And I had
baby.
nieces and nephews, and they were my first kids. And I love kids. Like, it's something about kids. I just love, I
Right.
love them, especially the younger ones. They just make me melt,
You
and
do.
that's just, I would help take care of other people kids, because I just wanted to be a mom.
So I want to ask you about that, Sharia. I want, with you still having this desire, obviously, and kind of accepting, like, okay, it's been, I found out in my early 20s. I'm 33 now. I'm married. It's been 3 years actively trying to have a child, and it's not happening, right? And you
Right.
said, you were babysitting and things like that. What I do want to ask you is, was there, because you say you babysit and you love children, was there a moment, and this is where transparency, comes into play. Was there a moment when you felt invisible, in rooms where motherhood was, celebrated, baby showers and, things like that? Did you, in that process, did you ever feel like invisible in that room because you felt like this is not going to happen for me?
First of all, I felt invisible in my own family. Like
Mm,
everyone in my family had children. I had um, my nieces and nephews, they're my love. My sister had a bunch of children, but her children were my children. As long as I didn't try to interfere with certain things, like they were my kids. Like I would walk down the street, I would walk down their block, and they would scream, "Sharia!" Even up until the day, like my nieces and nephews are in their 30s,
right.
and they still call me auntie. And to me that feels like so warm, like not Aunt Sharia. They come, "Hey, auntie." I just
Right.
love it. And but in my family, we're going to the family reunions or going to visit. Everyone's having a kid, and my cousins that are my age, they're all having children, and then going to the masjid, going to aqiqahs, going to weddings, going to bridal showers. Everyone has a baby, but I would just cling to all the babies. But yes, felt very invisible, felt less than a woman. But
Mm,
and even when I was married, and I was taking care of my ex-husband's children as if they were my own, loved them to pieces when they were babies. And, but they, I was just, my
mm,
house was the house where anybody could bring their kids because I was just taking care of the kids. But, you know, to feel that way at 33 years old, not having children, you know, being married prior to, it was my second marriage, and being around everyone and they having children. And it's just like, I done went to college. I had a degree. I come from a family where, everybody had at
mm,
least a four piece.
mhm,
Nobody walking around with the nuclear family in my
right.
family. That's just, and then, oh my gosh, when you live overseas, because I lived in Morocco and I
Mm,
lived in Syria and I lived and they have this thing like they have a thing in their culture like, if you have less than 3 children, you are not a
it was
woman.
wrong.
You are
Yeah.
not a real woman. So,
Mm, mm.
yeah.
I want to, with that, you just laid some heavy, gave validity to, I'm sure those that are tuning in that are possibly struggling with that you're not alone feeling. But with that, I
Yes.
want to now go to Naziat. And Naziat, I want to ask you, what are the most common emotional patterns you see, in women navigating, infertility, and that often goes unnoticed. So we were talking about being invisible. So this is something that some Sharia was, the auntie and the mom, but yet on the inside she was still feeling at baby showers and bridal showers that invincible, being invincible. So what do you find as common emotions for, women navigating infertility that often we don't see it as family members, friends, um, that goes unnoticed, basically?
Yeah, so there are a range of emotions that come along, right? And I don't want to say that, there's one specific emotion that, people experience, right? People, just like the stages of grief, people go through stages of emotions. People go through, anxiety, right? Especially when they're waiting for results at the doctor's office. Like, oh my goodness, what is it going to be? Am I going to be a mother? Am I not? Is my test positive? Is it not? Right? There are bouts of depression. I think depressive symptoms are very prevalent, especially in women who are undergoing infertility. I've also seen a lot of resentment as well. Resentment with themselves, resentment with, you know, um, others. There's a lot of regret. Like, had I done this, was I not taking the right? Was I not eating right? Was I not, what was I putting in my body that led me to this? Or, asking
Mhm.
like, why God, why did you put me through this?
That's what
Um,
Sharia said. Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. And also I've noticed that, in culture, in a lot of cultures, like Sister Sharia mentioned, right? Even in the South Asian culture, right? Um, Women get asked a lot of questions, right? And oftentimes inappropriate questions about
Mm,
pregnancy and having children. Why are you not pregnant yet? Why,
mm,
when are we going to hear the good news? When are
mm,
you going to have children? What's going on? I've had aunts. I have two aunts actually who underwent this journey, and both of them actually were faced with so many questions and so much speculation. So those are triggering, right?
yeah.
Those are triggering moments. And when it's triggering, you feel angry, you feel upset, you feel resentful, you start asking, you start, bargaining, like, why me? What could I have done differently? So
Mhm.
there are a range of different emotions, possibly jealousy as well.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
especially when those baby showers and gatherings and weddings, get-togethers, right? So, I want to say that there are a range of emotions, and also for men, right? I also want to
Yeah,
point
we're
out,
going to
even,
talk about that.
yeah,
Hmm.
even for men, there are a range of emotions. So, it's, and also the hormones that are coming into place, right? A lot of women are taking hormonal replacement medications that are affecting the hormones. So that also plays a part in how women react emotionally.
Hmm. So you mentioned that word. You mentioned that word trigger. So, like,
Mhm.
again, we're talking about, what women, and so women that are tuning in can identify, like, yes, these are, even though they vary, these are normal emotions to feel when you're in this season of infertility and trying to navigate what that looks like. And Sharia had to do the same thing. But what do you suggest, or what practical or daily techniques can someone who is being triggered by, pregnancy announcements, baby showers, those questions, like, okay, so when are we going to get the news and that kind of stuff? What would you suggest how a woman can do that in a healthy way?
Yeah, because people are mean and rude too. They ask, "You ain't pregnant yet? You ain't having no kids? When you going to get pregnant? When you going to have a
Mm,
baby?" So talk about that too, like how you can help women to navigate through that, because those were questions that, came out a lot. Like, I'm God and I control when I'm gonna get pregnant. Like, what?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's really triggering, right? It's very triggering, it's very daunting and overwhelming. You're already faced with the situation. And on top of that, it's like people are putting salt on the, on
mm,
the wounds, right? And
mm,
so, those couple of things that I will say, to help navigate through this is, one, be I think journaling. I think when you put things in writing, it helps to kind of see things on paper and, kind of identify the trigger. Like, what about it triggered you, and what was the reaction, and what can you do to, rectify that. Um, what can you do to kind of manage that thought? Can you practice mindfulness, right? Can you be in the present? Can you practice gratitude, right? What are you
mm.
grateful
That's a
for
good one.
in
Yeah.
the moment? What are you grateful for in the moment? What are some things that you can pinpoint? Who can you reach out to for support? you know and also, can you reframe, right? So let's say you heard something that was triggering. Can you reframe that and say, okay, this wasn't, I heard this was negative. Let me reframe that. If I were to talk to myself, right? It's positive self-talk. If I
Mm,
were to reframe that, how would I reframe it, right? Instead of saying, instead of asking, when are you getting pregnant, you know um reframe that and say, this, it's all in the, it's all within Allah's control,
right.
right?
Right.
And you are beyond that. We are beyond that. We are beyond that. You know, we are beyond what people tell us, and we are beyond what people ask us. So, a couple of things: mindfulness, journaling, and gratitude.
Right. And
Um,
reframing, positive
reframing,
self-talk.
yeah,
We,
positive
we
self.
have a comment here we have a
Yeah.
comment here. I want to read it. It's the sister here. She said had two miscarriages, two ectopics, one on each side. Her tubes remain, but she was diagnosed with severe endometriosis and was told she could never naturally have children. And she was in her mid-20s while she was married. So very similar story to you, Sharia, in her mid-20s married. But for those that we're talking about hope as well, we're talking about laws, but notice what she says here. 6 years into her marriage, 3 months after being told that she couldn't have children, was naturally expecting was naturally expecting their first child. So talking about that. So again, this is what this show is about. We want women to share these experiences. We want women to share, that there is hope, and we're going to be talking about what that hope looks like, because hope doesn't look the same for everybody, right? So I want us to talk about that. So I want to get back to you, Sharia, because we're talking about those triggerings and navigating that. And Nazia, you gave some real great practical, the journaling, the reframing of the questions, the gratitude. That was a big one. What can we be gratitude? Not what we don't have, but what we do have, right? So that was beautiful. I love that those practical techniques. But Sharia, I want to ask you, in those moments when you felt triggered, or in those moments where you felt invisible, how did you protect your heart in those spaces?
I don't know. I think like I said, a lot of times I would pray. I would cling to the babies that were in my life. Mm-hmm. And then I just stopped feeling hopeless. I was just like, wait, this doctor ain't God. God is in control. So I'm going to just keep on trying and keep on trying. And I did actually go to infertility doctors. And I even went through 2 rounds of infertility medication. And where, they're supposed to help you to produce lots of eggs so you can have those twins, triplets, or quadruplets. Mm-hmm. And my body only produced 2 eggs, and then I just, it just didn't happen. And I was just like, and it just didn't happen. So I really stayed out of those environments where people would constantly say that. And, I would just be like, I don't know. Don't keep asking,
So you protected yourself. You was like, I'm going to remove myself from spaces that are constantly triggering. I'm not going to stay in spaces like that. And I think that's so, that self-awareness is so important. It's, navigating, and like what Nazia was saying, what's triggering you, and then, being able to self-reflect and make that decision that you made to safeguard your heart, to be like, look, these are not safe spaces for me in this season of what I'm going through, and trying to navigate this journey of infertility. This is just not a safe space for me. So I think that's amazing, Sharia, that even in that space of grief and hurt, you still had the self-awareness to be like, hey, maybe these are certain spaces that are just not healthy for me right now. So I think that's so important. I want to ask Nazia a question. Sharia spoke to some of it. But I want to speak on a broader level. Like, how does infertility impact a woman's sense of identity, self-worth? And you can chime in, Sharia, after Nazia, but how does infertility impact a woman's sense of self-worth and her identity as a woman? And how can she separate? How can she separate from what she feels she can't produce? That's, you know what I'm saying?
Definitely. I think a couple of things, right? It's very multi-layered and it's very multifaceted, because we as women, right, like Sister Sharia said before, right, it's our womanhood. It's embedded in our identity, being being a mother, having children, bearing children, raising children. We associate ourselves with being being mothers and caretakers, caregivers, providers, right? So nurturers, right? So it's embedded in our identity. And when that piece is missing, oftentimes, women, what I've seen is women tend to feel like, I'm missing a piece of myself. I'm missing a piece of myself. And I validate that, right? I think we have to, like the self-awareness piece comes in, right? And what is it that you're feeling? What is your thought process? Because you have to kind of sit down and really reflect on what it is that you're experiencing in the moment. And so, like Sister Sharia said it beautifully, right? I'm a mother myself of 2 children, and at one point I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to have children because I had thyroid issues, right?
Now, how is it that I asked you to come on the show and this is the first I'm hearing about this? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
before I got pregnant, I was told that I have hypothyroidism, and thyroids affect metabolism and hormones and all of that. And I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to have children. Alhamdulillah, like there was a fear in me. Like I wasn't told, of course I can't compare myself to other women, and that's not what I'm doing. I'm not here to compare and say like, I've had it worse or someone else had it worse. But it's that fear that's instilled, right? It takes it takes away a big part of your identity, right? And how do you differentiate that, right? Again, self-awareness, self-reflection, journaling, gratitude, and setting boundaries. Setting boundaries with others, right? Especially, like, I loved how Sister Sharia said that she removed herself from spaces where people were not so nice about being, pregnancy and the journey and whatnot. Everybody's body is different. Everybody undergoes different situations and circumstances, right? PCOS, endometriosis. A lot of women undergo that, and those are some of the reasons why women cannot get pregnant. And so, it's about self-reflection. It's about self-journey. It's about self-reflection and awareness. Excuse me. And it's just about setting those boundaries with others and setting boundaries with yourself.
Yeah, I think that's so. You bring up such a good point. And one of one of those that are tuning in, she said during her wait, she protected her heart, and she actually fulfilled during that 6-year wait. She fulfilled her mommy needs by opening a home childcare. So as you can see, everyone is different. Sharia took it like, I'm gonna, love on my babies, which were her nieces and nephews. This sister here was like, I'm going to open up a childcare and I'm going to be that mommy, during those childcare hours. And everyone had, like you said, everyone had a different way of navigating and protecting their heart in that space. And Nazia, you have a fan here. She's saying hello. So I just wanted to let you.
And in addition, my husband, actually my ex-husband, but my husband at the time, he had 2 children, and he had several children, but he had 2 of his children were very young, and their mother gave them to him to take care of. She, it was like, I'm remarried, and your right is to take care of them if I'm remarried, for their safety, for their protection. And I'm going, and then they lived with me for a year, and then she went to Egypt. So then they became my babies full time without her, and they were very, very young. So
so you were able to kind of do that mommy
I
and
did
full
that
time.
mommy thing,
Full time, you was able to do that.
and it was full time before she left, because it was supposed to be like, because they ended up staying with us, but they were supposed to go with her every other weekend. But then it ended up being they were with us, and I loved it. Like, it was not a burden. I wanted to be, and it was a boy and a girl. So I
had
like,
the best of both worlds.
I had the best of both worlds. And then, and then something happened.
Right.
Something else happened, and
is it good? Is it good?
yeah, I'll let you navigate through this conversation, because we have to. I know I have to cover
I do
that.
want to. So we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that good news. So we kind of touched on it earlier. Some of the well-meaning comments, like, when are you going to have a baby, or when is it your turn, or when are we going to get those news? So, you speaking from a cultural perspective, Nazia, but Sharia, I want to ask you, since you mentioned, that actually happened to you. I want to ask you, what do you wish would have been said during that.
Nothing.
For those that are tuning in that may have a friend or may have family, maybe even a spouse, what do you wish would have been said versus the when are you going to have a baby? You don't have a baby yet, and those type of comments where they mean well, but what do
Some
you
meant
wish?
well, and some were just mean and
Right.
insulting and just, didn't care. I think that people should just mind their business and not ask anything. Don't say anything. Like,
Mm,
just don't.
don't
And,
ask those type of questions
yeah, like it's not even your business if I'm going to have kids or if I'm
or
not going
not.
to have kids.
Exactly.
It's not, it's so insensitive, it's rude, it's disrespectful, and it's like, when are you going to have kids? Like, we have control over when we're going to get pregnant. And if you see a woman has been married for a while and she didn't have children, why ask her that?
It may not be their plan. It may not be
May
the
not be
couple's
their
plan.
plan. It may be infertility issues. It could be anything, but it's rude.
Mhm.
Don't do that.
Right.
That was mean.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people do it to be mean. Some people do it to be mean. Some people, they do it to put you down. Oh, you think you're
Mm,
on your high horse. I'm going to remind you, you're not even a woman, a complete woman. You don't even have children. And even with exes, they do stuff. They say stuff. So,
mhm.
and my ex, he didn't like that I wasn't having a kid by him,
Mm.
because
So those were comments.
he wanted that for me, because he
Mhm.
did see how much I poured into his own children, and it was like, gosh, I just wish he could have just one with me,
Right. Right.
because
Mhm.
he heard the comments and he saw my pain, but he saw the love that I gave to his
And
children.
children.
And
Right.
when he was able to show compassion, it was like, dang, I wish she could experience this for
That's
herself.
real. Right. Nazia, what would you say? Like, for those that we know, some, unfortunately, for some, it may be intentional, but for those that are well-meaning and they just like, we come from a big family, when you gonna have one? And it's kind of like that innocent, but it's hurtful. Nazia, what recommendation could you give for people, to kind of counter saying those things that can be very painful, as Sharia had mentioned?
Yeah, it is very painful, and it's like I said, like we've been talking about, it's triggering, right? I think a lot of people are it's both ways, right? A lot of people
Mhm.
are well-meaning. Some people aren't, unfortunately. And I think it's the way that people ask the question, sometimes that really affects us, right? um Sometimes people come from concern, and sometimes people come from, malice, but it's really hard to identify, right, where they're coming from. And so I think my recommendation would be, I'm not gonna say that, yeah, disregarded, try not to care. I would say, what is it, kind of put yourself outside of that situation, outside of that context. What would you tell yourself? What are some, how, like I said, how would you reframe it for yourself?
Mhm.
What would you say to yourself, to make it positive? I'm
Right.
not to make excuses, right? Make excuses for that person, because what they're saying is, and what they're putting out there is not okay. But
Right.
you have control over yourself. We don't
Mhm.
have control over what other people say. We have control over what we do, our actions and our behaviors. So,
Mhm.
either we can choose to dwell on those comments, on those questions, which can be very difficult, or we can put ourselves out there and say, you know what, if I wish, look, remove yourself from those spaces, like Sister said.
Mhm. Mhm.
Remove yourself from those spaces. But also, right, if you're with family, for instance, family, right, even our own parents, sometimes even our own aunts and uncles, right,
Mhm.
they bring up things, right. um you can, I wouldn't say, I would say, like, address it, but address it in a way where it's like, what, where did that come from, or what does that mean? What are you trying to, where are we trying to get with this conversation, like
Conversation.
setting those boundaries. but also addressing it and letting, when you address it, you let them know that this is not okay. So there are many different avenues to take. And what I'm saying is not, it's not, you don't have to follow everything that I say, but there are ways to go
some
about
suggestions, and that's and that's
but you want to protect yourself at the end of the day.
right.
And
So I wanna ask this next question, and it's starting with, we kind of touched on it. So I want to delve into it because I know we got some people tuned in, and this may be their journey. So Sharia kind of, she mentioned that her ex-husband would notice her reactions when people would say certain things, and he was like, I wish we could just have one, right? How can partners, and I'm not talking about just from the husband's perspective, but how can partners in general, wife to husband, husband to wife, support each other when they're both grieving, but maybe grieving in two differently? What would you say to that, Nazia?
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing is, my recommendation is find support, find, environments where people are supportive, right? Whether that's friends or that family. Try to find that niche where, your people are supporting you instead of putting you, dragging you down. People are supporting you. Also, excuse me, be the backbone for each other.
Yeah.
Be each other's support. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Take a drink. Take a drink. I think that's a really important statement that you made, is being there for each other, being that safe space for each other to be able to share, because men grieve differently. We know that men grieve differently, but a lot of times they hold it in, which is not healthy. So being able to have that vulnerable space for each other is what you're saying.
Yes.
To be able to share, even though it may look different and it may manifest itself differently, you're saying give each other space to be able to share those different forms of grief.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, hold space for each other, right? Because you're on this journey together. It's the same goal. You're partners in this, essentially. You're teammates, right? So you want to be able to support each other and hold space for each other. But you also want to be careful that you're not projecting onto each other, or we want to refrain from blaming. We want to refrain from.
Right. That's a big one.
Right. So you want to have that clear line of communication, like, we're all in this together. We're both experiencing this. How can we hold space for each other? How can we be there for each other?
Right. I think that's a big one. Sharia, I want to ask you, now that so before we get into that, right? There was something that happened. Now that you're raising these two kids and you're raising them like, your own, what happened?
A couple of things took place. I guess I'm a school teacher, and I had some money saved up. My ex-husband, I sent him to Hajj. So he's on Hajj with his friend. And I was like, yeah, we're gonna pray. We're gonna pray me a baby. We're gonna pray for me a baby. All the du'as are answered. And at that time, I was teaching classes in our masjid, a holy mosque, our place of worship. And I started feeling really hot. So I went to the bathroom, and a gigantic blood clot came out. I was cramping, and a huge, huge, huge blood clot came out. And I was talking to him on the phone, and I found out that I had a miscarriage. So I was pregnant. I didn't know I was pregnant, but there's that grief and that loss, like, oh my gosh, I was pregnant.
So it was kind of almost that hope. It was like bittersweet.
Yeah. And he was away, and I the sister supported me, but then it was just like, and it came, the blood clot came in the bathroom, but I didn't even know I was pregnant. But found out I was. So then I'm out sad and depressed, but then I'm happy because, like, oh my God, doctor said I couldn't get pregnant. I got pregnant, but then I got pregnant. I lost the baby.
Right.
So then 6 months later, I get pregnant again. So this time the doctor's just like, okay, we're going to have you. I was visiting the infertility doctor because I was high risk.
Mm-hmm.
Because they told me I couldn't have kids. Then I got
Right.
pregnant, and the baby, it aborted itself. And then here I'm pregnant again. So every morning, once a week, was it once a week or once a day? I had to go to the doctors and get my blood tested to see my levels because they had to check and make sure my levels were still up. And they gave me ultrasounds. I had early ultrasounds. So the first ultrasound was like, oh, there go the egg, there go the sac. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And he was happy, I was happy. Then by week 3, month 3, I think. Here's the sac, but no egg. No egg. So I'm still going through the egg aborted itself. I'm going through morning sickness. Everyone knew I was pregnant. Everyone's happy, because here's Sharia, wanting to get pregnant. And that one was extremely devastating because I was 3 months and the baby, it was like an empty sac. And I was just like so confused. I didn't understand.
Yeah, it's a very confusing time when you miscarry.
Yeah, because it was just like I had a sac, and this is the sac, and this is the baby, but now the sac is empty, and you only see the dark, because like I said, I was going to infertility doctor, and they were so sad, and and then I lost that baby, and I had to have surgery this time. Because they had to get everything out of me.
They had to do like a DNC.
They had to do a DNC. So, and then my body was still going through changes after the DNC.
Yeah, because your hormones.
Yeah. So it still felt like I was pregnant, but I wasn't. So that was deep. That was rough. That was heavy. I feel it right now, like it happened yesterday.
Yeah.
And then maybe maybe 8 months later. By this time I'm sleeping. I'm so sleepy. I'm so tired. I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, I don't sleep anyway. I'm depressed. And I'm just like, what is going on? Then my breast started hurting. But I was like, well, my breast always hurt every time I'm getting ready to have my period.
So you thought
my breast always hurt.
Cycle.
Yeah. And
so
then,
what happened, Sharia? What happened? You got me in suspense, and you got all the readers, you got all the callers in here in suspense. What happened, girl?
And I was just like, wait a minute, did I get my period? And then I went and got a pregnancy test. And I took it. And I was like, I'm not going to. And I called my best friend. And I said, you better get your money together so that you could go and buy us, and so you could get your niece or nephew some clothes. And she was like, oh, what? You pregnant? No way. Oh my gosh. I was like, yes, I'm pregnant. But I don't want to tell him yet. And then I told my other best friend, who was my cousin. So then I was like, how am I going to tell him? So we went, I'm talking to my best friend because I needed her response before I needed his response. Because this was the community baby. My baby was the community baby. So then I went to the dollar store and I bought these booties, and they were ceramic. One was pink, one was blue. And I put a balloon and I made a card, and it said, pink or blue, this baby's for you. And we lived next door to the masjid. So I got out the car, and he came, and his little grumpy self, what's wrong with you? And I gave him the card and the booty. He was like, what is this? You going to a shower or something? Why are you handing me this stuff? And he opened up the card, and he was like, you pregnant? You pregnant? I love it. He picked me up in the air, and he spit me around, and he yelled to the brothers in the masjid. And he was like, we having a baby, man. We having a baby.
So to let you know, for all of those that are tuning in, this baby ended up being their first child, Manel. And Manel was actually in our Jessica Cares program, and they have a son also, Muhammad. So.
And you wanted to hear something even deeper? Manel was born, And then 3 months afterward, my mom was like, yo, you sleeping a lot. I was like, I know, because Manel had me up all night. And she was like,
No,
I
I
think
don't think
I'm
that's why.
pregnant. And I was like, I can't even get
Wow.
pregnant. Like, Manel was my miracle baby. Manel was my miracle. Manel was my baby that everybody that went to Hajj prayed for.
Mm-hmm.
I prayed to God, if you please get, like the dua for Miriam, I made that same dua. I said, please,
Mm-hmm.
Allah, if you give me a baby, I will raise her to be service of you. Oh, Allah, just please give me a baby. I just want a baby. So I prayed. And I remember when I got pregnant, I know the day, it was the day of Arafat, where all the Muslims were standing on Arafat.
Wow.
Because I didn't, yeah, I mean, no other time that month, but then. So I know when I
So
got
you knew
pregnant.
exactly when you got pregnant. So just for the viewers that are watching, we have, and this is where the hope comes in that we were talking about. This was a long journey and it was not easy. I mean, Sharia explained 2 very difficult miscarriages through this process, as you know, and being just told the devastating news at such a young age, she's not going to have it. It's not going to
And
happen
going
for
through
her.
infertility treatment.
Yeah.
I took Clomid,
Yeah.
2 rounds of Clomid, and IVF. I did IVF.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a long journey, but the hope is that uh Sharia ended up having 2 biological children. In spite of being told, in spite of the miscarriages, in spite of the infertility treatments that at times didn't work, she ended up. So I want to go to Naziat right now, and I want to ask you, as we're getting ready to close our discussion, I want to ask you, Naziat, for those that particular beautiful story that we just heard, and we can see the excitement in
And I
Sharia.
gotta add, and I have to add something else, because my life was such a roller coaster with
I
infertility.
just want to ask this, and then I'll bring that back, Sharia. For
Okay.
those that that may not be their ending, right? What are other, motherhood can look different, and I want to share what other ways can someone that may not be their ending story. And we're so happy that Sharia had that, and one of the sisters just mentioned it in the comment section that happened for her too. But for some that may be tuning in, it may not happen. What other options can they look at, and what other forms of motherhood can they entertain with compassion and with love, understanding that all of us want to have our own babies, but what are some other options that mothers can look at?
Yeah, we have advanced technology, we have advanced medicine, right? We have IVF, we have other forms of treatments that people can undergo, right? But apart from that, right, I think you have to define what motherhood means to you, right? Because
Yeah,
motherhood
that's the point.
looks different for everybody, right? Excuse me. Motherhood to me, could be like nurturing a child, right? I felt like I was a mother before I had my own kids. I felt like I was nurturing other children and taking care of other children when I was working in after school programs. So it really, you want to identify what does motherhood mean to you. You want to start there, and then you can find ways, right, inshallah, to hone in on that. You can do acts of service. You can engage in different activities, right? Like Sister Sharia, you were there for your nieces and nephews, right? You were raising other children. Yes, it's not the same. I'm not saying like it's the same as
Right.
having your own, but it gives you, it may give you a sense of purpose, but you have to define that for yourself. You have to figure out what it is that you want for yourself before you delve into that journey of motherhood.
Mm-hmm. And I want to share also, and I know, like you mentioned before, it's not the same. We know it's not the same when it's not your biological child. However, the other, defining what motherhood looks for you, there are children that are, adoption may be an option for you. They've opened up. I remember when I was growing up, adoption was very stringent. You had to, fall in these very narrow conditions in order to be able to adopt. They've expanded that. I remember growing up, you couldn't be a single parent and have a child. You had to, there was just so many conditions to having a child, and now they've opened up that platform, so it's a little more, because they understand there's so many children that want a loving home. They want that mother, they want that father. So that may be an option, that you may be an answer to that child's prayer. We're talking about prayers right now. You may be that answer, and that child may be that answer to your prayer. There are children in foster care right now that are truly, especially infants and those that are aging out. Maybe you don't want to have maybe an infant, but you want to have a someone that you can dress up and have those conversations. Though there are children in foster care that has never known what it's like to not have to carry a plastic bag with their belongings in it, going from house to house, never knowing when it's the next time they're going to have to leave. You may be an answer to that child's prayer. You may be an answer to that child knowing what having a family looks like, right? And the same for you. What motherhood, defining what motherhood looks like for you, you can maybe have that experience with that child. So there's a lot of options out there now. And again, not the same. So it's not, I want the tuners that are going through that. By no means is it minimizing, of course, wanting to have your own. But as Sister Nazia mentioned, defining what motherhood looks for you, it may broaden your perspective of, what that can possibly be for you. So I want to, Sharia, you had something that you wanted to say, but then I'm going to close with asking two final questions for the two of you. So Sharia, go ahead and share what you wanted to share.
Even with me having the children, and I just say, don't give up hope. And, everything is by the will of God. And I will always believe that my kids were miracle babies. My ex-husband, he would always say, because we got divorced and I got remarried again, and I never had a child with my husband after him. So I battled with infertility again. And I really wanted to have, and we were married for 8 years, and I never got pregnant, didn't use birth control. And I actually was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2015, and they took my right fallopian tube, so and all my eggs. So I always wanted more than 2 children. I wanted 4 children. I was grateful with my babies, but going through that again. So and I never got pregnant again. It's just and it was hard because this marriage was different. He wanted, and it was just like we really wanted to have this baby. Like we tried like for a month straight. We tried every day, and it just didn't happen again. And my ex, he always says, "No man on this earth." You can hear that voice, right? Was ever strong enough to break through them tubes besides me. I am the only one. He has this whole speech that he says because.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah.
But it's like you said, it's by the will of, Allah's the will of God that, his decree from the time that we're in our parents' womb. What our life is going to look like, how many children we're going to have or not have is already written. So, that acceptance part that you were talking about, important part
and acceptance even after my son was born, because I didn't use any contraceptives, and I never got pregnant again. Married for 8 years, never got pregnant.
Yeah.
One time I went through, my period didn't come on for a month.
And it's still, you thought that maybe, and it wasn't. Yeah. So I want to ask you, this is a final question as we close our discussion today on, when the cradle is empty, infertility, loss, and hope. So Sharia, I'm going to start with you. If you could sit across from a woman who just received that devastating news that you received at 21, you can never have children, what would you say to her?
I would say your grief is real. You not having children doesn't define your womanhood. I understand. I I validate your feelings because it's hard. You know, it's hard.
Yeah.
I will never tell you to give up. I will
That's
never minimize your pain. And you don't have to walk this road alone. And I understand.
Yeah. I think that's just knowing that they're not alone. It's huge to know that in those nights, that those silent cries that nobody hears, that someone is actually there for them. So thank you, Sharia, for that. Nazia, coming from your perspective, and now even knowing, your personal journey as well. Um, if this discussion was a turning point for someone, watching, what do you hope she or even he, a husband watching, right? He or she, what do you hope either one of them walk away believing about themselves?
Yeah, I think definitely that, you know, when you're approaching this, right, when you're reflecting on this journey, right, you want to tap into the uniqueness of it, right? You want to tap into the fact that there are different avenues, right? That there's hope, right? It is, you want to acknowledge that this is a challenge, but that there is hope. And there are different avenues that, you can utilize to navigate through this journey, right? It's not one size fits all. I think I would like people to walk away with the fact that, you know, how do you, how do you define all of this? What is it trying to teach you? Because in our religion, in Islam, every journey is teaching us a lesson.
Yeah.
It's there to teach us something. What is it teaching you? What is it teaching about yourself? How is it affecting your identity? So that's what I would like people to, leave with.
Yeah, and being more self-reflective, self-aware, coming
Yeah.
from a place of gratitude and so forth. So, wow, we unpacked a lot. We unpacked a lot in this discussion. There was a lot of emotion. We went through the journey of it. So I can only imagine some of those. We've had some, even in the comment section, sharing their success stories and, their journey of going through that. So we're so grateful for those that tuned in and engaged with us. Thank you so much. This is what makes, our conversations so, so important. And even for those that's paying it forward, they may not have tuned in today, but they might be, when they're looking for that hope, might find this particular conversation, and the engagement will be able to hopefully have them walk away with feeling better, or having a better understanding of how to navigate in a positive way through this process. So this conversation, by no means I'm speaking to those that are tuning in, that are going through this navigation. I just want you to know that this is what Women of Ascension is about. It's about, supporting, enlightenment, compassion, and it being a safe space to say, you know what, today may not be a good day today, and that's okay in this journey. So I just want you to know that you are truly, truly loved. I'm sending out virtual hugs to you right now, and I'm sure I can speak for the speakers. They feel the same way. They are here. They have platforms on all social media sites. Their names are right there. If you type it in, and you need to reach out to them, because they do understand from a personal perspective, but also from their background with education. They can really assist you in being able to navigate this in the hard days. And so I'm just thankful that you tuned in today, praying for your healing, praying for your potential blessing, and possibly looking at other avenues of what motherhood looks like for you, and then taking some of those other options and seeing if that works for you. So that is what we wanted to share with you today on our show, Conversations with Asiya, where purpose is awakened. And so this is our first of 2026. We do this show, Conversations with Asiya, right here once a month, and sharing topics. So our next show is going to be on Friday, February 27th. February, everybody's talking about love and all this stuff, but we want to talk about, in those spaces of love, those silent voices, the emotional and sometimes the verbal abuse in those intimate relationships, and how you can rise above that, and how you can gain the support and the resources to be able to have a safe space to be able to do that. So stay tuned for that. If you love the conversation that we had today, please like the show. Please share it with someone that you know can benefit from what we discussed today. It may change their life. Pay it forward. Just like you benefited from the conversation, someone else can do the same. And if you have not, and you're on our YouTube channel, I want you to subscribe to our channel so that way we can grow this community of women of ascension, and helping all of us, founder, those that are our guests, we are on an ascension trying to be the best versions of ourselves. So everyone, have a great night, have a beautiful weekend, and if it's snowing in your area, stay safe, and I'll see you, God willing, at our next Conversations with Asiya.